this friend of your brother's says he wants to make a kung fu movie?
Yeah.
Was that tough having your brother still working on Mortal Kombat and still showing up to work all the time while you were focusing on the school? What's your relationship like now with John?
With John and Ed, especially, not good. Not good.
I do want to ask you one more question before we go.
Sure.
Are you proud of your little brother? Welcome to another episode of Pick Up and Play, folks. My name is DJ Switch, and since 2011, I've been the DJ and MC for the Portland Retro Gaming Expo in Portland, Oregon, one of the largest and oldest public retro gaming events in the world. This year, the Expo is excited to reunite the entire original cast of Mortal Kombat, and I've been very fortunate to have the chance to interview as many of those folks as possible over the coming weeks. Starting with today's episode, featuring Master Daniel Pesina. Daniel was the original actor responsible for bringing to life the characters of Johnny Cage, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero in the original Mortal Kombat, and he famously left the franchise after Mortal Kombat 2 due to some very public legal and creative issues, which he still feels very strongly about to this day. Many of you folks know me as a DJ, a personality, and a content creator, but you may not know that I was a journalism major in college roughly 20 years ago, and since then, I have worked off and on for online video game outlets, hosted podcasts, and I've been fortunate to conduct both personal and professional interviews in that time. The only reason I am mentioning all of this is so that whoever views this will understand what I mean when I say this is the best interview I've ever conducted. Master Pesina feels very strongly about his relationship with the Mortal Kombat franchise, the two well-known creators of that franchise, Ed Boon and John Tobias, as well as his relationship with his younger brother Carlos Pesina, the original Raiden, who maintained his position with Midway and later with NetherRealm Studios until he retired 2 years ago during the early production for the most recent Mortal Kombat game titled Mortal Kombat 1. I'm very grateful to Daniel for his openness and candor during our time together, and I am so excited to share this with all of you. As always, if you would like to support the show and check out the exclusive Lost Level content that I've recorded for every single episode of this podcast, you can find that extra content as well as ad-free and extended versions of every full episode at patreon.com/DJSwitchPDX. As always, my thank you to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo for partnering with me on this show. And of course, my thank you to our sponsor Vault 31 Bar for their support. With that, it is my great pleasure to present my interview with Master Daniel Pesina from Mortal Kombat. Master Daniel Pesina, I would say it's a pleasure to have you on the show today, but in the interest of honesty, I've got to correct myself. It is an honor, sir. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you're here today because I have so many questions. I definitely want to, of course, talk about Mortal Kombat and your relationship with that franchise, but I have to admit up front, I've been a Sub-Zero main for over 30 years. So this is such an incredible honor to be able to talk to the man that helped create that character. But I definitely want to go back a little ways. Now, I know you were born in 59 and you started, you were 9 years old when you started in martial arts?
Yeah, actually born in 1958.
58, okay.
Yeah.
And then you started martial arts, I think, in 69, is that right?
68.
68, okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you got started back then, obviously you were fairly young. Did you have any ideas about where your martial arts career was going to take you and what you had planned for, like, down the road?
Actually, I took martial arts to get back at my older brothers. I have two older brothers and one famous younger brother, Carlos Raiden. But the two older brothers are much older than I. And, they're great, super great brothers. But, that being older brothers, they would win at everything.
Sure.
We'd have races, they would win. I'm being the youngest. So back then there wasn't a remote control on the TV. So I was the remote control on the TV. I would be going to the kitchen to get them a glass of milk or stuff like that. I would do all the grunt work. I wouldn't have to throw out the garbage or anything like heavy like that because I was much too young for that type of thing. But, in general, they would be just, be able to, because they're physically bigger than me. My oldest brother is 9 years older than me, and the second one is 7 years older than me. So, the age has wisdom and strength with it. So, uh, I saw, I was watching Charlie Chan, the detective, with my father, and I saw him uh, throw a guy, and I was like, "Holy cow, what was that?" And my dad was like, "Oh, that's judo. I learned some in the army." My dad was in the U.S. Army, served
Okay.
in he served in the Korean War, uh, and so he was just like, "Yeah, it's judo." And I was like, "Man," and I just thought, if I learn that, I'll be able to win. I'll be able to wrestle with my brothers and beat them. And so, that never happened. I never got to really wrestle and
Right.
beat my brothers, but that was my mind. What my incentive was
Sure.
so I bugged my dad to take lessons, because at that time there was no kids class. Like when finally my dad had enough of my pestering to learn martial arts, he took me to a martial arts school, and the guy looked at me and he's just like, no, I'm not taking, you're too young. There were no kids class. There was a teenage class, but there was no kids class. But my dad was just like, he looked on the wall and he saw that the guy was in the military. And he was like, "Oh, you were in the army." He's like, "I was in the army." So they got to talking, and all of a sudden the guy is like, "I'll take your son because you were in the army and I was in the army. I will take your son, and see how he does." And I just wanted to learn so passionately that I didn't complain, and I stuck at it. And I got to train with 13-year-olds. I was turning 10 years old, and I got to train with the 13-year-olds kids. So yeah, it was fun time.
My martial arts experience extends all the way to a yellow belt, which for those that aren't familiar with the belt structure system in modern martial arts, that is basically the equivalent of getting to the character select screen. Uh, so I effectively have no real experience in martial arts. But there was something you said that I definitely connect with. When I was 14 years old, my band director asked me if I wanted to learn how to run a soundboard, because I was kind of good at computers and I was very passionate about playing music. I'd been playing saxophone for a few years at that point. And so at 14 years old, I was like, hey, I could combine computers and music and turn it into DJing. And that might be a fun way to, play music and kill some time. There might be something to that. And then here I am, 26 years later. This dumb idea I had turned into a lifelong passion I never expected.
That's awesome. I also play sax.
No kidding. Which one?
Yeah. Tenor, and a little alto.
Attaboy.
Yeah, I sat first chair in our jazz band in our concert band back in
Man,
high.
that is crazy. I actually started out in the alto, and then in the 8th grade, I picked up the baritone sax and never looked back.
Cool.
Completely fell in love with the bari sax, man. But I'm 6'4", so like, even as a kid, like I was like what, 5'10" in the 8th grade. Like the bari sax was a good fit for me anyway. Yeah. But of course, like when you come to Portland later this year, we'll get a chance to meet in person, and I'll be able to shake your hand, and you'll be able to see just kind of how, most folks come up to about my nose.
Yeah.
But listen, man, obviously we've got to talk about your relationship with Mortal Kombat. You won several tournaments. You had a very prolific martial arts career, and then eventually, this friend of your brother's says he wants to make a kung fu movie.
Yeah. So
how did that go?
My brother had a friend, John Tobias, and they used to draw at my parents' kitchen table. They used to go to each other's house and practice drawing art.
Yeah.
By hand. There was no computers back yet that can do that type of thing. So he wanted to be a director. So there were times that he was like, he had an idea to take his father's camera and shoot a kung fu movie. So we always goofed around with like that. And sometimes we'd hang out, go to movies or do things together. I recall that one time we went to see Ralph Bakushi's Lord of the Rings
Oh,
when it came out in film. So we all got jumped in my car and went to see that because we were, though I'm a martial artist, I'm also a geek, a comic book collector. I learned that from my older brother. My older brother also collected comic books. So,
okay.
So it was handed down. It's a family tradition. So, yeah, I just finished doing stunts for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And John called me up and he's just like, hey, remember when I wanted to do that thing? I work, to make movies and stuff like that. Well, I create video games. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Because actually we played some video games together, but back in the day. But yeah, and he's like, I want to do a live action video game. Will you help me create it? And I was just like, that sounds really cool. And he's just like, I can't pay you a lot, but whatever idea you have, we're going to put in the game. And I was like, let's just do this. What do we got to do first? And then he was like, first we got to pitch the idea to the company I work for. Mm. So he's like, so we got to put some things together and put some stuff, package together and present it to the company. So we basically, because he didn't want anybody to know his idea. So we snuck into Midway Games and recorded some movement, fight scenes and some martial art moves. And we had drawings and we put together a proof of concept, what we call today proof of concept. And so he presented that to Midway. And they liked the idea and they sent a representative to meet with us to talk about perhaps doing the game. And and the representative said no.
Of course. You want to do what now? No, I'm not going to pay for that.
well, yeah, because in his defense, and now he's credited with co-creating the game. But in his defense, he has to watch out for the company's money.
Right.
And we are nobody. We are not proven or nothing like that. We're just a group of friends who have this idea to do a live action video game. You know what I mean? Right. And his concept, he thought it would be better off if he did a mainstream video game, like a beat 'em up, like a Karate Fighter with Jean-Claude Van Damme. So he's like, nah, we're not going to do your game. I think it's better off with, we're going to come up with a different idea and do a mainstream fighting game. So, our idea was canceled. And then luckily a few months later, I got a call from John, and John was like, hey, remember our project? And he's like, yeah. They're going to go ahead with it. I was like, well, what happened? And he's like, well, Jean-Claude Van Damme wanted money. Right. And our company's too cheap. Yeah. So, can you still help me create this game? So John and I got together in a room for 7-8 days, 10-12 hours a day, creating Mortal Kombat.
Famously, obviously Mortal Kombat is listed as one of the highest grossing franchises of all time. And, game studios now, like all across video gaming in general, not just fighting games, but like all video gaming, most studios are multi-million-dollar studios operating with 7, 8, sometimes 9-figure budgets. And so it is tough sometimes to realize that there was a time in the early 90s and in the late 80s when game studios didn't have those kind of budgets and they weren't operating on those kind of numbers because games weren't nearly as popular as they are now. And so the idea of paying for someone like a Jean-Claude Van Damme in his prime probably was very far-fetched for them at the time. And so their solution then was to take a chance on this unproven project with some folks that had some stunt work and martial arts in their background, but didn't really have celebrity names yet. Was that kind of the mentality there?
I don't think so, because later on they got okay for Schwarzenegger, who's a much bigger action star.
Mm,
When we were right when we started filming, when John and I started creating what would later be called Mortal Kombat, uh, they were pursuing Arnold Schwarzenegger for Terminator video game, which they got.
Midway
So
produced, I think, Terminator 2, right?
yeah, yeah. So they started talks with that, as I recall. I think
Okay.
around that time, but I think it was just schematics, maybe too, that Jean Claude was doing in negotiation with other projects, maybe, and
Mm,
he couldn't do that, maybe, or something, other things like that maybe fell through. Maybe he didn't think he could make enough money, or who
yeah.
knows, who knows
I'm,
really. It's all in the pitch, or it does, or may, too. It's like when you back then you don't really, what doing a video game is like. What is that? You know?
right. Right. It's and contracts are complicated, especially with A-list stars. Like they get very complicated because along with A-list stars, you have A-list entourages and whole teams of marketing people and representation people. As a matter of fact, even just today, like I'm so grateful that you and I are able to have this talk. But we got to give a big shout out to Derek who set this whole thing up. And as I understand it, he's helping to sort of like coordinate everybody for your trip to Portland in September, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's helping
Um,
to get
s-
the
so
friends together.
how does it feel then to be this far along in your career, this far along in your relationships with your co-stars for Mortal Kombat? Like, is it does it feel pretty cool to be able to like hang out with them at conventions and be able to reminisce and just like meet the fans and kick it? Like that's got to be pretty fun, right?
You know what? We haven't changed. So we knew each other. We knew each other before Mortal Kombat.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, when you guys wait till you meet us, it's like exactly like a bunch of like a group of brothers, and with Liz sisters, it's just like it's like a family. It really is. It's like we know each other so well. You know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
just goofing around. So it's 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 really cool to see them, because we don't get to see each other as often now that life has grown. And like Hosung lives in California.
Mm.
Rich doesn't live near me. My brother lives like an hour and a half, 2 hours away from me. Liz lives in Arizona. She's far away too. So we're all kind of move separately, even though we talk on the phone all the time. It's different than actually hanging out and, face to face. But
Yeah.
when we're together, it's like we've never left each other's side.
I mean, when you're part of an experience like that, I imagine there's got to be at least some level of bonding that happens for a unique small group of folks. I was doing some research for this and managed upon a story about you and Rich and John, and there was a car accident. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there and how that affected your relationship with John and with Rich?
Actually, that we were going to film a movie. It was before Mortal Kombat,
Hmm.
and we were going to finally film a kung fu movie. And so we were just looking for a location. We're going to do it guerrilla style, and we're turning into a forest preserve.
Right.
And there was a kid with a brand new car. He just got a brand new car, and I think it was like a Camaro or something like that. And he just
Sure.
decided, as we're making a left, he decided to pass us on the left, and he hits us. And Rich is in the back seat. He hit us right a few inches away from where Rich is sitting. If he would have hit us a little bit uh, closer to Rich probably would have been killed. So we
Oh my
spun out.
gosh.
Yeah, spun out. The car was totaled. We never got to shoot that project, and that was part of the pitch. When John called me up, he was just like, "Hey, remember that movie we never got to do?"
Oh, you mean the one where Rich almost died? Yeah, I think I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah. So with that trauma and just sitting on the roadside waiting for a tow truck to come get the car and just all us doing that in that time where, where you're really appreciating life because, your life flashes before you when you're spinning off. The car spun like three times and landed in a ditch.
Man.
So, and, it was pretty scary. So, you become close like that. So that was the time that we really, even though I got hung out with John before, John and I and Rich became really very, very close.
Wow. Now I know obviously, your brother Carlos, you mentioned that John and Rich were friends before Mortal Kombat happened. Was were you friends with Hosong as well? Like what all was the friend group, and like who all did you all know each other, or did you get to meet a couple folks on set, or how did that work out?
Hosong and Tony Marquez Kung Lao knew John before Mortal Kombat.
Okay.
Like we've hung out before, went to house parties. That was the big thing back then. House music, house parties. Yeah. And to video games. All those guys play video games. So we used to go to Dennis's for games in Chicago. There was a place called Dennis's for games. We used to hang out there quite often.
Real quick, you grew up in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of folks may not know this, but electronic music actually started in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like Chicago is a big blues town, it's a big jazz town, but then also from that eventually spawned the early days of electronic music. So house parties were like literally house music parties. Like people would get together and like that's where like DJs kind of became a version of what we know of them as today, right?
Yeah. House music. Chicago is the birthplace of house music, and what you hear today as far as like DJs and spinning,
modern EDM and that kind of stuff, that all came out of the Chicago scene from like way back when.
Yeah.
I mean, man, it's interesting to see what an interesting and central artistic hub Chicago became. That I feel like doesn't get enough credit, because everybody thinks about the big hubs for entertainment. They think New York, they think LA. But I think, New Orleans definitely had its stamp on the music world. Chicago absolutely is responsible for a lot of what we recognize, even if we don't necessarily recognize it as being from Chicago.
Yeah. And it's the birthplace of the modern fighting game now with Mortal Kombat. Got to throw that one in.
Also true. I mean, and that's the thing is, you had Street Fighter, you had Pit Fighter, you had a couple other clones. But what Mortal Kombat was doing, capturing real martial artists on live video, was entirely unheard of in 1991-92 when you all were working on this. So like now, what we recognize as motion capture, what we recognize as green screens and wire work, like Hollywood studios are doing it constantly. Video game studios are doing it constantly. And it all started with Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, we had none of that technology. We didn't even have green screen. John and I started creating it we went into a storage room and we found a flat wall that was painted gray, and we just started filming on that. We got desk lights to light it. We lit it with desk lights and overhead lights. And the whole first project was filmed with John Tobias's father's high 8 camera. So it wasn't even a studio camera. It was his father's camera. So it was just because, again, the company didn't really believe in the project. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just let John and I roll with it. But naturally, we're grateful that they eventually, when they saw what was happening, they did contribute. Everybody contribute, a lot to it. But I think that helped a lot because it didn't blur what was going to the fantasy creation. You know what I mean? You get too many cooks and it could spoil the soup.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning, it was just, John and I were just, goofing around. That's how we came up with, fatalities. During that time we came up with brutalities. During the first game, we came up with so many ideas that, we came up with so many ideas. Ed would just write them down and continue slowly partaking in them through the whole franchise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the test footage is out there. That poor microphone stand. You guys beat the hell out of that microphone stand. Anybody with Google can find those early days test shots where it's you guys and the gray wall and the crappy lighting. And honestly, I started out, I think my first video projects were on my dad's Hi8 in the late 80s and early 90s. And so I can certainly appreciate what a piece of crap those cameras really were just compared to what we have now, man.
Took a really long time to figure out how to do anything. We took days to figure out everything, with the mic stand, when I finally figured, when I was kicking, I was like, I just thought, like, well, when we bring the next person in, how are they going to kick exactly where I'm kicking? So I just looked around the room and I saw the mic stand and I was like, hey, can I use that? And then John is like, oh, that belongs to Dan. And I was like, Dan who? Dan Forden, the music guy. And so I was like, well, let's go ask him. So all of a sudden, John and I are walking through Midway looking for Dan Forden, the guy who created the music for Mortal Kombat, to ask him if we could use his music stand. And then I saw Dan and I was like, hey, I'm just going to put a couple of things of tape on it to mark spots. And, I'm not going to really kick it or anything like that. And Dan was like, yeah, go ahead, use it, And so all of a sudden we just started, he would come in to check us out once in a while, see what we're doing, So it was just, it took me 3 days. If you look at the footage, it took me about 3 days to put that imprint on the floor. That's over a course of, that's not just in one day. That's a lot of mistakes and realizing, like, I can't go here, go there. You got to do this, you got to do that. And all of a sudden I'm marking the floor and trying to figure out where everything's going. A
lot of trial and error.
A lot of limitations.
It took some time to
figure it out.
A lot of
limitations, yeah.
Cool. Anybody that's landed an uppercut in the first couple Mortal Kombat games knows Dan Toasty Forden. I mean, come on, that dude's a legend in his own right. And as a sound nerd, like he's one of my unsung heroes in the video gaming world. But I know that, like, the game took off almost immediately. No one had seen anything like this before. It was so gory. It pissed off everyone's parents, which of course made all the kids want to play it more. And so, very quickly, the game took off and people started to recognize, I presume, the actors. Did you get a lot of, like, attention all of a sudden once the game took off? Were you having trouble finding a place to have lunch in peace, that kind of thing?
No, actually, I never had that type of trouble or anything like that. My focus was never on that. My focus was always on the creating.
Mm-hmm.
The creating the game and creating the movement and figuring out how to make everything like like unique.
Yeah.
Like, we wanted to make, for the first and second game, we wanted to make sure that later on they wanted to use they asked me to come up with a cookie cutter formula for Mortal Kombat 3 and 4. When we were creating number 2, they wanted to make a cookie cutter formula for 3, 4, 5, or however it was going to go. And I did that. I should have not done that, but I did that.
Yeah.
So that way they can bring anybody in and anybody could do that. And that's also my design to do that. But that's craziness. That's my own stupidity. But anyway, if you look at 1 and 2, everybody does everything just a little bit different. And I made sure that everybody could put their own personalities in their characters. So when we're creating the personalities for the characters, there was no guidance. The first day of filming, John put me in front of the camera and said, do something cool. That was it. That was
Thanks,
the only
John.
guidance I had. So first thing I started doing was, because I took Kung Fu, was combinations. I started
Okay.
doing combinations. Like the big uppercut comes from a system, Northwest system, very popular in it, particularly with tumbling boxing, Fanzi Chuan. You punch the bladder, you drag the fist up, elbow makes contact at the end, and that's why you have that flip up, and it's like a big uppercut.
Okay.
So that comes from a particular style. So when I was doing that, so everything was kind of like, was designed in a particular fashion. And then later on, when we brought people in, I was like, I did the uppercut like this. So when you do the uppercut, you might have to bring the elbow back and make the elbow more pronounced at the end of the strike, or you might have to bring this straight out. So that way, all the characters would look different. And that way, when they put their personality into character, it wouldn't be like, oh, I'm doing it exactly like I did it.
I think that's definitely a good place to take our mid-break, but I want to touch on the specific characters because you played several in the first couple of Mortal Kombat games, and they all have a different feel. So I think I want to pick up there when we come back from the ad break. Folks, this episode has once again been sponsored by my friends at Vault 31 Bar. Just 10 minutes north of the Portland airport, Vault 31 is a video game themed bar built for absolutely everyone who loves gaming and geek culture. They offer an incredible selection of beverages and signature cocktails alongside tons of PC and console games available to play. Recently, I had a chance to sit down with David from Vault 31 Bar, who provided the latest update on their remodel and their upcoming all-ages cafe space.
Our walk-in just got here, which is one of our biggest issues we've had with the bar already, is we just don't have enough cold storage.
You were like running out of stuff all the time, and that's because
all the time. Yeah, it's the cafe solves a lot of our issues, and our biggest thing is we've outgrown our little fishbowl, so to speak. We did a huge kitchen remodel that we did not anticipate being as successful as it was. Like we created these little burgers, and they're flying out of here. People complain that we run out of stuff too fast, is because we just simply can't store enough of it. And so this fixes that now. And so the popularity of the burgers will hopefully continue, and we'll be able to sling these things out in larger quantities.
In addition to being an amazing and welcoming geeky culture space, Vault 31 has also become the home of my monthly Lo-Fi VGM event. And this weekend was our best Lo-Fi evening yet. The Lo-Fi event has been a big hit, and I truly think part of the reason for that success is that I picked the right venue. We've had giveaways courtesy of Kuraga Records, and the team at Vault 31 has even gone so far as to cook up some food specials to fit the theme of the night. If you want to find out more about Vault 31 and what they have going on in the coming months, well, I'll let David tell you the best way to do that. Listen, David, where can people follow Vault 31 Bar on socials? Like, where can people find you? Like, how does that work?
We're Vault 31 Bar and everything. Best thing to do is actually just go to vault31bar.com. It's going to link you to our social. It's going to link you to our Discord. We have an awesome Discord community. You'll see updates on there, all kinds of fun stuff. Yeah, head to the website. I know it's a little old school, but it's like our link tree or whatever people use nowadays.
Thanks, David, and thank you for everything you've done for this show. Now, back to the interview. So you played Johnny Cage. Famously, you played Scorpion. Of course, Sub-Zero was a palette swap with Scorpion, and so like you just sort of like use the same costume, but there's more to it than that. And anybody that's played those first couple of games, it's very evident, just not only with the move list, but also the way that the characters move. And I'm not just talking about like, you know, the spear versus the ice blast or whatever. Like straight up, the high punch for Scorpion feels different than the high punch for Sub-Zero. So what was that process like, making those types of decisions and trying to figure out like how each character would move independently from each other?
The whole process started with when we were pitching the game to Ed and Midway. Those ninjas were going to be Japanese ninjas. Mm-hmm. So the night before we're going to have the meeting with Midway, John called me up.
Like a Shinobi kind of thing. Like Shinobi was around back then, and so that was, I imagine, some of the influence there, the idea of doing a Japanese assassin.
Yeah, Shokashugi. Shokashugi. It was really popular. Mm. So we wanted to make, John was like, I want to make this as unique as possible. Do you have any unique ideas? And I was just like, the night before I called John up and it's like, John, I got an idea. And he's like, what? And I was like, we're going to change the Japanese ninjas into the Lin Kuei. And John was like, what's that? And then I was like, I was like, I'm going to show you the book. I'm going to show you the book, and we're going to add Lin Kuei and mysticism. So they're not just going to be they're not going to no longer just be doing energy. It's going to be mysticism. Instead of being superheroes, we're going to add magic to the game, where it's kind of like this mystique stuff. And we're going to make these characters totally different than how they originally are. Nobody's ever had Lin Kuei in any movie or in any comic or in anything. This will be a totally different thing. And John is like, if I can make it work, I'll do it for you.
Like superpowers.
So already when we were going to shoot the first Scorpion, we didn't have a name back then.
Right.
I already had it like, okay, this is going to be, even though Johnny Cage is the father of all Mortal Kombat characters, we shot every single move ever in Mortal Kombat with Johnny Cage. So He is the father. He is the first one we filmed with. We spent 3 months filming him. And if you look at Ho Sung, we spent 4 days filming Liu Kang. So, so 90 days versus 4 days, it's a big difference.
Right.
So, so I was just like, man, we I really want to make this character kind of like unique and stuff like that. And then when they mentioned the palette swat, besides teasing John, I was just like, oh, this is going to be good because there's going to be even more. We can get into a deeper story, even though there wasn't really going to be that much of a story. But in my mind, I was just thinking, man, this is going to be cool. And two, in the end, I shot actually 4 extra characters. So I think they turned part of one into Reptile. But I shot enough. I shot enough of that Lin Kuei for 4 Lin Kuei, but we only used 2 and a little bit of Reptile.
Okay.
For that. But so in that process, they were all from the same school, so they had to look kind of the same, but they had to be a little bit different because they were still individual. They weren't, you know what I mean? Even though you study the same style, the original story was they're all brothers. So even though they're the same style, they're a little bit different. Carlos is my brother, but he is different than me. So, that was the thought process into doing these characters.
Gotcha. So different influences in their lives might lead to different choices they might make in the moment, and back to like what you were talking about before the break, where this elbow comes a little farther out, or this this character might not reach as far on a full extension, that kind of thing. So it's fascinating to learn a little bit more about like some of the choices that went into those different characters, because anytime any actor has to play multiple characters, obviously there's a lot of choices that need to go into how you separate those characters and make each character their own. So I think it's really, really fascinating, especially as someone who played multiple characters within the franchise, just to kind of get some insight on how those choices were made. Was there ever any confusion? Did you ever have any kind of a struggle when it came down to figuring out like how you were going to use those backstories to inform that movement and inform the creation of these characters on screen?
For one thing, the story was all created while we were doing the action. So the story wasn't like, oh, here's the story. All the story was happening because of the action. So actually the personalities are the muse to the story. Like the story wasn't preset. When we were doing the movement, we'd be goofing around and all of a sudden we'd come up with the story.
So writing came later.
Yeah. So it was the action and stuff like that, because we would be filming for hours, 10, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then we'd take that footage and we'd send it, we'd give that footage to Ed so he could review. so that way he would be like, okay, we need in order for it to fit in the game, here we got to make this, because naturally, because I'm used to shooting for a movie, which is different for a video game. So he was really just making corrections of, hey, we need to do this movement has to be this because otherwise it won't work, or things like that. My crew, making adjustments,
fitting within the technical limitations of what we had for computers and video games at the time, which was incredibly primitive compared to what we have now, right?
Yeah. So the story was really being developed at the time of the filming. It wasn't like, here's the story. No, it's so connected to the actual videotaping of the game.
Right. Okay. And then of course the game is a success. They immediately start working on Mortal Kombat 2. They add a couple of characters within that the feel of that original Lin Kuei design that you created. So now instead of just Scorpion, Reptile, and Sub-Zero, we've added Smoke. We've added a blacked out character that they named, John and Ed named after themselves. And was there ever a point where you were specifically working on characters that were designed to be secret characters, or were those decisions made later on in the production for Mortal Kombat 2?
Mortal Kombat 1 is when Carlos and Rich came up with secret characters, the concept of having a secret character.
The idea of that, okay.
Yeah. They came up with secret character tag team. They wanted to have Raiden and Kano be a tag team, but only Raiden and Kano. So if ever Raiden was losing, Kano would come in and help him win. And if ever Kano was losing, Raiden would come in. But John said no, that wouldn't go because quarters. It's all about making quarters, and that would misbalance the game, and everybody would be wanting to play Raiden and Kano, and nobody would pay any of the other characters. So they had this whole setup idea of doing that. The footage you see on YouTube, the behind the scenes footage of the creation, that's like my footage. I have like 8 hours of it. So right now I think maybe there's an hour on it. So I have like 6.5, 7 hours more of it. So I have them all creating all this crazy stuff. I have moves that nobody will ever see. Movements that we never use, like special moves that we had an idea and we just didn't have time to use them. They never came out and they never will, and they're just lost. So
I imagine there's some legal stuff to releasing that requires some consideration before you just put it out in the public, right? Like you can't just let that out into the world.
In my opinion, it shows, it shows it shows a collaboration. It shows that there wasn't 2 creators of the game, that there were really 5 creators of the game. And I think that they don't want to really have that because it would mess up their IP.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because then they'd be like, hey, wait a minute. Those 2 didn't come up with that idea. This guy came up with the idea. Oh, really? Yeah. This video shows this guy created that. Just like, everybody's Get Over Here. Kano created Get Over Here. He's the one who originally, that's why the voice sounds like that, because it's Kano's voice. Because when I was doing the rope dart, Rich was like, get over here. And then he did an uppercut. And then all of a sudden, John and Ed laughed, and Ed walked around the studio all day saying, get over here, and doing that move. And now it's in the game. But really, and nobody knows, hardly anybody knows that.
Whose voice is on the recording for that?
Ed's voice is on the recording.
Ed recorded that. Okay.
Yeah, Ed recorded that, but Rich DeVizio created that. So, but a lot of people don't know that Rich created that. So
I'll have to ask him about that. Hopefully I'm going to be able to get him on the show. I'm working on trying to get everybody on because, you're all going to be making a trip up to Portland for the Portland Retro Gaming Expo later this year. And I'm super excited to meet everybody. And my hope is that I'll get a chance to talk to Rich, for example, about like, you know, some of his experiences in creating some of the moves and some of the catchphrases, that kind of thing. So, with any luck, I'll be able to chat with him directly about that.
Yeah, yeah, and mention also Rich created Scorpion being skeleton.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, yeah. Like John was like, I want Scorpion to blow fire. So I was pretend to blow fire. So I blow fire, and then I turned to John and was like, I'm not doing this shit anymore. And John is like, don't be an asshole. What's up? And I was like, John, if I blow fire, my mask will be on fire, and I will be running around the studio with my head on fire. And then John was like, well, then take off your mask.
That is the most Chicago shit ever, dude. I'm not doing this shit anymore. Don't be an asshole. What's up?
And then Rich was like, oh, and when he takes off his mask, he's a skeleton. And then I was like, and his face is on fire like Ghost Rider. And then John was like, oh my God, we're going to do that.
That's so great. Well, I want to touch on. There's one more thing I want to touch on before we let you go today.
Sure.
I want to move into the future a little bit, and I want to ask you about your relationships now. Obviously, you have a great relationship with a lot of your original castmates. You mentioned you're all still friends. You're all friends from childhood. What's your relationship like now with John?
With John and Ed, especially, not good, not good.
Mm-hmm.
Just, promises were made, unfortunately, I never got it in writing. I should have. So,
how do you feel about that though? Like honestly, just, all the legal stuff and all the like business stuff aside, I mean, how do you feel about it personally?
For a while, I was bitter, very, very bitter. Now it's just, hearing the stories, you hear about different, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, all those guys got ripped off, man.
Yeah.
So it just happens all the time. Money and fame change people, so, all I have to say is right now is if, John and Ed hear this, and if they ever want to go live on a panel with me, my brother, Rich, Hosung, Liz, let the truth come out. Them two, us five. And then, they can say their piece, and then we can say our piece, and people can really learn about the creation of Mortal Kombat.
I certainly think it would be an interesting conversation, if nothing else. My understanding is that at least as of 2019, Carlos was still working with NetherRealm Studios. Is he still there?
No, he's retired.
Retired. Okay.
2 years. 2 years retired.
You, I know that you parted ways with the franchise a long time ago. Carlos stuck around right up until last couple of years. Was that tough having your brother still working on Mortal Kombat and still showing up to work all the time while you were focusing on the school?
It was both tough, and it was cool because it was his path. He really wanted to do that. He really wanted to get into he was a graphic designer. Eventually he designed, not only Midway's motion capture studio, he designed NetherRealm's motion capture studio, so he got to really, he wore so many hats. When he retired, they tried to hire 5 or 6 people to replace him, and they never finished doing that. And
Yeah.
I think that shows with the new game, and how much it suffered, and how, this new game is not, for me, I hope that all the games do well, because all the games, they can't get away from what I created. If they have Scorpion and Sub-Zero in them, those are my concepts.
Johnny.
Even though other people got to co-create with me, if I didn't tell John that night, we got to change the Japanese ninja into Lin Kuei and tell him all about that, there wouldn't be no Sub-Zero and Scorpion. We wouldn't have the concepts that we have today. So unless you get rid of those, and those are the ground of Mortal Kombat. So I always hope that it does really, really good, because it is, it's partially my creation, like to co-creation. It's my co-creation, as well as Rich's, as well as my brother's, as well as Liz's, as well as Hosung's, as well as Tony's, Marquez. A lot of the base group really put in extra things to make it, to make the characters and to help the other characters expand. Later on, and any actor who steps in, I love those guys, because anybody who acts like me doesn't suck. So, you know what I mean? And I love that they add stuff. I love the $500 sunglasses. I love that phrase, and they add that stuff, keep adding people, I'm really jealous that Carlos has Christopher Lambert, because I'm a fan of his. Damn it. He plays, he gets to act like my brother. So I'm jealous of Carlos for that. But, I really hope that the franchise continues and does better, but I think that with this latest one, with Carlos retiring, I think it really shows that, who helped really get out there, who deserves a little bit more credit than what was given. And I think that in the end, I feel in the end that that's what really is between John and Ed and I, is like, that credit was never done, and that's what really, for me, that hurts with John. And for Ed was the boss. Ed was the guy who said no at the beginning, and it should have been the guy who took care of us, because he's the boss. You know what I mean? He's the boss of the game, and originally he said no to the idea, and all of a sudden he embraces the idea, and he's the co-creator without really acknowledging the whole past. And I get kind of offended with that.
Yeah. I understand. I do want to ask you one more question before we go.
Sure.
Are you proud of your little brother?
Heck yeah. Yeah. He did a lot. He went on to do a lot more than when you ask him about things, he's got a really good eye for things. For me, I am a martial artist, so I know, like, for me, I would have never gone on to do that, because I just love martial arts more. While he is really good, continues to do martial arts to a pretty good degree, but he can cross over into that industry way better than I can. You know what I mean? If you want unique fighting styles, I could give you that all day long. But if you need an eye to be like, oh, we're going to transition this fighting style into a movie or into a video game, he's got a good eye for that.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate your candor and your openness today. Master Pesina, where can folks find you on social media?
On Instagram, Master D Pesina. Facebook, Master Pesina. Email, Master Pesina.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, sir. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of my interview with Master Pesina. Of course, a massive thank you to Master Pesina for his time and for his candor today. A thank you to our sponsor, Vault 31 Bar, and of course to the Portland Retro Gaming Expo for helping to support and partnering with me on this show. Folks, this was such an incredible experience. I told him at the very top of the show that I've been a Sub-Zero main for 30 years, and to meet the man who helped create that character and bring that character to life in the very original Mortal Kombat, which, by the way, I owned on the Genesis, I owned it on the Amiga, and I played the heck out of it in the arcades. Like, I played a lot of Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 back in the day. So this was an incredible experience for me, just as a fan, let alone as a content creator and a journalist. Like, This was absolutely amazing. So thank you very much for sticking around to the end of this. Of course, if you want to see more from Master Pesina and the other folks that I've had a chance to interview so far in my ongoing Mortal Kombat series, make sure you check out patreon.com/DJSwitchPDX, where you will find exclusive bonus content as well as extended and ad-free versions of these full episodes of this show. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be able to do this, and thank you all very much for watching and enjoying this episode. Can't wait to share the next one with you, which is, by the way, a man by the name of Ho-Sung Pak, who helped bring to life the character of Liu Kang in the original Mortal Kombat, as well as a character by the name of Raphael in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 and 3 back in the day. A fantastic interview with Ho-Sung Pak is coming next week, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that with you as well. Until then, take care, and I'll see you on the next one.